For the following equations, we need to find the vertices, foci, and asymptotes. And once we do that, we're going to sketch our graph. Now, to sketch the graph of a hyperbola, we're going to need to sketch in the central box, then the asymptotes, plot the vertices, and then finally draw the curve that represents our hyperbola. So let's start off with our first hyperbola, x squared over 4 minus y squared over 16 equals 1. So I know this is in the basic form of x squared over a squared minus y squared over b squared equals 1. And from here I can figure out what a and b are very easily. A squared is equal to 4, so that means a equals 2. And b squared is 16, which means that b equals 4. So that's easy enough. And from here we can start figuring out what we need, which is the vertices, foci, and then the asymptotes. So let's start off with the vertices, v. The vertices are in the form of plus or minus a comma 0 because we are centered at the origin for these examples. And we know that a is 2, so that means my vertices are at plus or minus 2 comma 0. And there are my vertices. Next, we're going to find the foci, and the foci are at plus or minus c comma 0. Now, we don't know c, we only know a and b, but we can use the fact that c squared equals a squared plus b squared to find c. So we plug in our a and b. C squared equals 4 plus 16. C squared equals 20. And then square root of both sides. C equals plus or minus 2 root 5. So we now know c, so we can plug it in here for our foci. And it's plus or minus 2 root 5 comma 0. And there are my foci. Last, we need our asymptotes, and because we're dealing with hyperbola, we have slant or oblique asymptotes. I'll represent it as SA for slant. And that is in the form of y equals plus or minus b over a x, which means our slant asymptotes are at plus or minus 4 over 2x, which when you simplify it down is just plus or minus 2x. So we have our vertices, our foci, and our slant asymptotes. Now we can actually graph our hyperbola. And by looking at the basic form of this, since the minus is in front of the y, I know that this is a horizontal hyperbola, means that our graph is going to intersect the x-axis because it's horizontal. So I'm going to start off by graphing my vertices at plus or minus 2. So negative 2 here, positive 2 here. And I need to graph my central box, which is just a way to kind of guide. And the central box again follows a and b, so 2, which is under x, along the x-axis, and b, which is under y, which is on the y-axis. So we draw a point here and here, though we're not going to actually go through it. This is just to represent our central box. And now that I've done that, I can actually graph my slant asymptotes, and it's always going to go from the top of one corner to the bottom of the other corner on each one. So top right through bottom left, and top left through bottom right. So my asymptotes are going to go through like this, and then like this. Now I got my central box, I got my asymptotes graphed, I got my vertices drawn. Now I draw my hyperbola, which goes through the vertices. So, like so. Here, never actually crossing the asymptotes. And then like so here, again, going through the vertices, but not through the asymptotes. And here is the sketch of this hyperbola centered at the origin. Again, this is a horizontal hyperbola. Now let's do it for this one. 25y squared minus 9x squared equals 225. Let's zoom in just a little bit. And since this has a negative in front of the x, I know it should be in this form of y squared over a squared minus x squared over b squared equals 1. Now this and this are not in the right form. These are not the same. Or excuse me, in the same form. But we can change this to be in this form here by dividing everything by 225, because I always need my hyperbola set equal to 1. So 220, oh sorry, that's should be just 25. 25 y squared over 225 minus 9x squared over 225 equals 225 over 225. Now just reduce this down, and we're going to end up with y squared over 9 minus x squared over 25 equals 1. So now I have my hyperbola in the correct form, and I can see that a is equal to 3, and I can see that b is equal to 5. And again, from here, I can find out my vertices, foci, and asymptote. So let's start off with the vertices. So the vertices are going to be in the form of 0, comma, plus minus a. And a in this case is 3, so 0, comma, plus minus 3. So there are my vertices. Foci, going to follow a similar form. It's going to be 0, comma, plus minus c. And again, I do not have c, but I can get c using the exact same formula from before. So c squared equals a squared plus b squared. C squared equals 9 plus 25. C squared equals 34, which makes c equal to plus or minus root 34 because it cannot simplify down. So my foci are at 0, comma, plus minus root 34. Simple, easy enough. Last, I'm going to do my asymptotes, my slant or oblique asymptotes. So SA for the slant asymptote. And that is in the form of y equals plus or minus a over b x. So this one is a over b, whereas the other one was b over a. And I know my a and b as 3 and 5 respectively. So y equals plus or minus 3/5 x. And those are my two slant asymptotes. Now I can get ready to graph. Now I look at my function or my hyperbola here, and I can see that because the minus is in front of x, that this is going to be a vertical hyperbola, meaning that the hyperbola is going to intersect the y-axis. So that's where the vertices are for. So I'm going to graph those. One at positive 3 and one at negative 3. Now I'm going to start putting in my central box, which is going to come from a and b. Again, a is under y, so up 3 and down 3 on the y-axis, and b is under x, which is going to be left and right along the x-axis. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here, and 3, 4, 5 here. And I'm going to draw my central box. And now I can graph my asymptotes, which again are at plus or minus 3/5, but just like before, it's going to run from the top left corner through to the bottom right corner, and the top right corner through to the bottom left corner. So, like so. And just kind of complete that over here. And then over here, like so. So now I have my central box drawn in, my vertices plotted, my asymptotes done, and I know that my hyperbola is going to intersect the vertices here at plus or minus 3 on the y-axis. So it's going to look like this, again, not intersecting the asymptotes. And I'm going to little, it's okay. Then like so, and then finally like so. And here is the final graph for this hyperbola. Just make sure that if it's not in the correct form, starting off, just divide everything by what it's equal to make sure it's set equal to 1, so it becomes the hyperbola in the correct form.